John Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963. Oswald was arrested. 2 days later, Ruby shot Oswald dead on live television before he could stand trial. The Warren Commission said Oswald acted alone. In 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded the assassination was probably the result of a conspiracy. Thousands of files remain classified in 2024, more than 60 years later. The question isn't whether you believe the theories. The question is why the files are still secret. Lee Harvey Oswald was not an unknown drifter. He was a former Marine stationed at one of America's most sensitive intelligence installations, Atsugi Air Base, used for U-2 spy plane operations over the Soviet Union. In 1959, he defected to the Soviet Union and announced he would give the Soviets military secrets. The CIA opened a file. The FBI opened a file. In 1962, he was allowed to return to the United States with no prosecution and no serious interrogation. In the summer of 1963, he was in New Orleans distributing pro-Castro leaflets, while simultaneously being observed in the company of anti-Castro Cuban exiles with CIA connections. He then visited the Soviet and Cuban consulates in Mexico City. The CIA station there monitored foreign visitors to both consulates. What their records show about exactly who Oswald met in Mexico City has been classified for 60 years. The Warren Commission was not given the full CIA file on Oswald's Mexico City visit. Not lost, not overlooked, withheld. The CIA withheld documents from the Warren Commission. That is documented fact, not theory. The officer who managed CIA contacts with a Cuban exile group that had direct confrontations with Oswald was later appointed as the CIA's liaison to the congressional reinvestigation, without telling the investigators who he was or what his history with that group had been. Here is what the declassified record shows about that. George Ioannidis was a CIA officer who in 1963 handled and funded the DRE, a Cuban exile student organization whose New Orleans chapter had a documented confrontation with Oswald months before the assassination. When the House Select Committee convened in the 1970s, the CIA appointed Ioannidis as its liaison to the investigation. The committee didn't know who Ioannidis was or what his history with the DRE had been. They found out decades later through declassified documents. Ioannidis died in 1990 and was awarded the CIA's Career Intelligence Medal. The committee's chief counsel, G. Robert Blakey, later stated publicly that the CIA had lied to his committee and that the Ioannidis deception was sufficient to conclude the CIA had obstructed the investigation. The CIA has never formally responded. Jack Ruby shot Oswald in the Dallas police basement in front of television cameras 2 days after the assassination, before Oswald could say anything publicly about what had happened. Ruby told the Warren Commission repeatedly that he could not tell the full truth in Dallas and needed to be taken to Washington, where he could speak safely. Commission Chairman Earl Warren declined to take him to Washington. Ruby died in prison in 1967. The House Select Committee later found Ruby had made multiple calls to organized crime figures in the weeks before the assassination. The committee concluded Ruby's killing of Oswald was more likely than not a deliberate act to silence him. The full record of Ruby's organized crime connections and what they had to do with November 20th was never fully investigated. The Warren Commission, the CIA withholding documents, Ruby silencing Oswald, all documented. But in 1979, Congress reopened the investigation, and what the acoustic evidence showed changed the official government position on the assassination permanently. Almost nobody knows that position was changed. Here is what the committee found. The House Select Committee on Assassinations reopened the Kennedy investigation in 1978. Acoustic scientists analyzed a Dallas police dictabelt recording from November 22nd and identified 4 distinct impulse patterns. One appearing to originate from the grassy knoll in front of the motorcade rather than the book depository behind it. 4 shots from 2 directions meant 2 shooters. The committee adopted the finding and in 1979 concluded that Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. The acoustic evidence has been disputed by subsequent scientific panels. What cannot be disputed is this: the official United States congressional position on the Kennedy assassination changed from lone gunman to probable conspiracy in 1979 and has never been formally revised. The probable conspiracy finding is the current official position of the United States Congress. It receives almost no mainstream attention. In 1992, Congress passed the JFK Records Act, mandating full release of all assassination records by 1997. The deadline passed, documents remained classified. In 2017, Trump announced a full release, then blocked thousands of documents on CIA and FBI recommendation. Biden delayed again in 2021. Thousands of documents remain classified in 2024. The specific justifications for continued classification have themselves been classified. The argument that 1963 documents damaged national security in 2024 has been accepted by every administration asked to evaluate it, without those evaluations being made public. The question the classified files raise is not whether Oswald pulled the trigger. The forensic evidence that he fired shots is substantial. The question is whether he was alone, whether anyone knew in advance, and whether the institutions that investigated the assassination had conflicts of interest they chose not to disclose. Those questions have been pending for 60 years. The files that might answer them are still sealed. The classified files, the CIA obstruction, the House Select Committee conspiracy finding, the Ruby testimony that Warren refused to take to Washington, all documented public record. And there is one final element almost nobody covers: what the assassination actually did to American institutions, and the specific conflict of interest that sat at the center of the Warren Commission itself. The Warren Commission included Allen Dulles, the former CIA director who Kennedy had fired after the Bay of Pigs. Dulles ran the commission's working sessions and was its most active member. The man Kennedy fired from the CIA ran the investigation into Kennedy's assassination. That conflict of interest was never disclosed to the public. The Church Committee of 1975, which revealed CIA assassination plots, COINTELPRO, and the intelligence abuses of the Cold War era, was directly enabled by the public skepticism the Kennedy assassination had created. Public trust in the American government, measurable in polling data, began its long decline in 1963 and has never recovered. The assassination did not just kill a president. It produced a permanent fracture between the American public and the institutions that governed it. Dealey Plaza is a tourist attraction today. The files are still classified. The House Select Committee conspiracy finding stands unrevisited, and nobody connected to the institutional failures around November 22, 1963 has ever been held accountable for anything. Oswald killed before trial, Ruby dead before his appeals resolved. The CIA officer who managed a group with direct Oswald contact awarded the Career Intelligence Medal. The files still classified. The probable conspiracy findings still on the congressional record. And the man Kennedy fired from the CIA ran the commission that investigated his death. History's dark archives. The files are real. The redactions are too.